What is going on, you lovely ladies and gentlemen of the world? I am here today to finally talk about Fire Emblem Three Houses. I've meant to do this for a minute, but it kept slipping my mind, just like this game has kind of sort of just been slipping my mind. So before I get into it, I just want to kind of give you what I'm going to talk about, because I'm sure at least a few people are going to listen to this and they don't want to hear any spoilers. They don't want to hear anything about the story. They're just looking into this, like seeing what people think about the game. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the gameplay first, how I feel about the gameplay, what its good aspects are, what its bad aspects are, and then I'll talk about the story, which will include spoilers, because some of the examples that I have of things that I greatly dislike and that pretty heavily impacted my enjoyment of the game, they are spoilers. So before I start actually talking about the story, I will say, like, alright, I'm done talking about the gameplay, I'm going to talk about the story now. Spoilers incoming, leave if you want to. So that's how I'm going to do this entire thing, just letting you all know up front. And so let's talk about the game. Well, actually, but first, let me just give you a quick and dirty summary of the game, at least from my viewpoint. I personally put it about on the same quality level as Awakening. And now allow me to quantify that with my own opinion of the Fire Emblem series at large. Very overly simplified, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but basically, I enjoyed Awakening. I found that it had its flaws. Not a lot of, like, whatever, I don't want to get into it. But far and away, like, so much better than Fates. Oh god, did Fates hurt me. Fates was the first Fire Emblem that I played that I struggled to actually, like, that I wanted to put down, that I had to put down occasionally and come back to it later. Every other Fire Emblem game I've ever played, regardless of how I felt about it afterwards, I still played through it, and I overall enjoyed my experience. Fates was the opposite. I had to push myself to finish it, just hoping that it would get better by the end, and it never did. And unfortunately, I also did it like the opposite. It would have probably been better if I had played Birthright first, then Conquest, and then Fates. Fates was the one that really hurt me. That one was just the worst Fire Emblem I've ever played, period, no question. But Birthright was also pretty bad. And Conquest was just, like, nothing particularly good about it, nothing particularly bad about it. It was just whatever. So if I had played Birthright first, Conquest probably would have seemed a lot better by comparison, and then I would not have had, like, God, I really didn't like Birthright mentality going into Fates. But still, Fates, oof, not a good time. Path of Radiance, my favorite Fire Emblem ever. Radiant Dawn, third favorite Fire Emblem? Yeah, third favorite Fire Emblem. I really didn't like the new characters there. It's not necessarily anything to do with the new characters, it's just they introduced this entirely new faction, and then you barely spend any time with them, and all the units are ultimately generally pretty underwhelming to use as well. So it would have been a lot better if more time had been spent with these new units, and if the newer units had not been, again, as underwhelming as they wound up being. The two Game Boy Advance games. Blazing Sword is my second favorite. Sacred Stones would probably be around the same level as Awakening, I would say. Maybe a little bit higher. But yeah, so there's my whole... I didn't actually play through Echoes. I read that it was like an 80-hour time commitment or something, like it was a very long game, and I just really wasn't feeling it for a variety of reasons, so I'm going to leave that one off the list. Shadow Dragon, I also was just bad, so let's not talk about that one either. But yeah, so anyway, so that's what basically just kind of quantifies my statement about how I feel of Three Houses being about on the same level as Awakening. It was overall a net positive. I enjoyed it, but I also find it to be very deeply flawed. Now, allow me to talk about those flaws. So first, we're going to get to the gameplay. Now, let me talk about something first, which I do not think is an objective criticism at all. This is purely just my own opinion. But I miss the Game Boy Advance games. I miss the animations that they had, because they had character, they had flair, they were enjoyable, they were just fun. Like, those games were so colorful and just unique overall. And then Path of Radiance comes along, and they dial it back. They go for a far more realistic approach to all the animations. And ever since Path of Radiance, like, again, I mentioned, Path of Radiance is my favorite Fire Emblem game ever. But the first thing that I do is go in and I turn off combat animations whenever I go back and I play that game, which is fairly regularly. I really do enjoy that game. Same thing with Blazing Sword. Like, those two Fire Emblem games, I go back and I play regularly. But Path of Radiance, I turn the combat animations off. Blazing Sword, I keep them on. I love those animations. So, again, it's a little bit of pettiness first, but it's the same thing here, man. Like, it's just, there's no character to the animations. It's all basic bitch status, and that's boring. Like, give your characters some actual character. They don't do that. It makes me very sad. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first, because things that make me sad should be things that shouldn't exist in games that you enjoy. So, first, legitimate criticism, which they are apparently maybe possibly addressing, but I'm not actually entirely sure. It's way too easy. This game is the easiest Fire Emblem game I've ever played, going into it blind. I will say, now I have not delved too deeply into the game, into what is possible, but from my understanding of it, from like kind of just extrapolating what should be possible, what shouldn't be, it's way easier to go back into like games like Awakening and Fates and abuse the systems that you have available. The class change system, the ability to infinitely grind, which technically you can do in this game as well, but it has to be on normal difficulty. I'll get into that in a bit. But it's really easy. Plus the pair-up mechanic in Awakening of Fates was way more broken than this game's. What are they called? Adjutants or whatever? I have no idea how to actually pronounce that. Way more broken to pair up in that game. And so it's definitely a hell of a lot easier to break those games, but you have to plan it ahead of time. You have to know, you have to have knowledge of the game mechanics. You have to know like what parents to pair up in order to create the most overpowered child. You have to know what class abilities combine to make the most overpowered unit, so you skip between those classes, get the abilities, and then possibly potentially grind it up as well, so your units also have like max everything stats. You have to premeditate breaking those games to make them incredibly easy. Whereas in this game, it was just incredibly easy from the outset. And a bunch of different factors play into that, but ultimately, like, even if those factors didn't exist, this would still be the easiest Fire Emblem game. But let me just bum rush through those factors. So how I feel is that basically normal mode in this, so there's only two difficulties, normal and hard. Normal difficulty is pretty much equivalent to old games easy difficulty, and hard is essentially equivalent to old games normal difficulty, which should kind of highlight how easy these games are, especially if you're a Fire Emblem veteran. But then those are the only two difficulty levels you have. You don't unlock something new, because they have a New Game Plus available, but they don't have any new difficulty levels that open up. There are allegedly further difficulty options. They have apparently been data mined in the game. Hang on, let me open. I looked it up beforehand. 2 additional difficulties called Maddening and Infernal were data mined. Maddening was, I guess, kind of already done, and then Infernal was just like not done at all, but it's even impossible. Like, units were level 99 with maxed out stats, which you just couldn't beat. But then on top of that, it wasn't complete. Like, certain units wouldn't load into the game, stuff like that. But there is no listing. If you go to the official page for Three Houses, it doesn't actually list like, oh yeah, we're going to be releasing new difficulty levels. All that they have here, so I'm just going to talk about this, 4 waves of DLC. First is just new costumes for the main character. The second, by October 31st, additional auxiliary battle maps, helpful in-game support items, and more. Wave 3, additional quests and costumes, plus a free update by December 31st. Wave 4 is new story content with additional playable characters, locations, and more, plus a free update by April 30th, 2020. So nowhere in there does it specify we're going to include new difficulty levels. And on top of that, if they do release those new difficulties, is it going to be part of the free update? Which I would certainly hope it better be. Or will it be part, like, do you have to pay for it? Which is just an instant disqualifier for me. I'm not going to buy the DLC pass for this game. But so again, it's not actually listed. It's not specified in this entire list. So who knows what's going on there. But all that I do know is that what's available right now in the base game is incredibly easy. So, the various mechanics that make it like this. The rewind function. What do they call? Oh god, I forgot what they called it off the top of my head. Divine Pulse. So you are given a certain amount. You can do various things throughout the story to get more Divine Pulse charges. And by the end of the game, I believe I had 15. And I could have gotten more. But I had 15 the first time I finished the game. I didn't even pay attention to how many I had the second time I finished the game. But yeah, so you have that function there. So if you do screw up, you can go back to any point so far, like in the entire game. You can go back to the very first turn if you want to, or you can just rewind it like 3 actions ago. And you don't have to specify the turn either. It literally has an entire list available to you when you hit the button to use Divine Pulse of this unit did this unit did that, so on and so forth, for every single unit, for every single action in the entire game, and you can rewind to any point. I used that more often to see if I could quote-unquote save scum level-ups than I did for its actual intended purpose of potentially like covering up screw-ups where you got a unit killed accidentally. I just never had to use it for its intended purpose, really, until the final 2 levels is when I did have to finally start using it, because I was bringing units that I really hadn't been using at all, and they were just incredibly weak. They got one-shot by like 75% of the units on the map, and so if I was careless, if I wasn't paying attention, which is entirely my fault, I should be punished for that, they would get killed, and so I might have to use it there. But I used it more often throughout the game just to test and see if I could save scum level-ups. So I send a unit out, they get experience, they level up, they get a crap level up, so I'm like, alright, let me rewind real quick, see if I get a different level up. Nope. Okay, maybe it was just coincidence though, so let me try it with this unit instead. I got the same level up. Alright, I guess it's not possible. Like, I used it more often for that than I used it to actually save bad decisions. And the reason why is because the game basically prevents you from making bad decisions. Because they have implemented a new, they tell you what enemy units are going to do before they actually do it. So if you put a unit out somewhere, if you try to move them somewhere and they're going to potentially get attacked, a red arrow will come from the unit that is going to attack your unit on the enemy's turn and tell you specifically, that unit is going to attack this guy, they're going to do this much damage, and they have this percentage of a chance to hit. They tell you, they give you all of that data before you even make your move. And it's like, so it's basically impossible to make a mistake, because you select a unit, you put where you might want them to move, and then all of a sudden 15 arrows come out of nowhere and are like, this dude's going to die. Like, okay, maybe I shouldn't move him there. Then you move him somewhere else instead. And it's just like, okay, this is supposed to be a strategy RPG, but you can just go ahead and tell me what my strategy should be based on, you are actually literally telling me what the enemy units are going to do beforehand. Thus, I don't actually need any strategy, I just need to make sure that there are no red units being directed toward potentially vulnerable units of my own. It's crazy. I cannot believe they put a function like that exists in a strategy game. No weapon triangle anymore. That's gone. Characters do get abilities which give you all the positives of the weapon triangle, but none of the negatives. So like if you go through a path specific to a weapon type, you'll get like anti whatever the other weapon triangle type used to be. So if you go, like if you're a sword master, you're going to get a skill called Axebane, which makes it so that axe users basically can never hit you, will never hit you, you have a higher chance to hit them, you have a higher chance to critical hit them. Same thing, lance users would get Swordsbane, and axe users would get, and axe users would get Lancebane. But it doesn't implement the negatives. You don't get that and then be like, okay, well now I'm an axe user, I have advantage against lance users, but I have negative effects against sword users. I'm actually not it never felt like it, but I cannot be 100% sure because I never looked if enemies ever actually get those abilities for themselves. I have to assume they would, but it just never came into play. At least I never saw it come into play. Like, I never just got blown up out of nowhere. Like, I never sent one of my sword users, which were all, like, my top 4 strongest characters were all sword users in my first playthrough. And so I don't know if the sword users are just blatantly more overpowered than the rest of the cast, or if that just happened to be how it played out. But so I never sent out a sword user and had it act like a Pegasus rider or something show up and just annihilate them out of nowhere and be like, holy crap, where did that come from? Then I go and scroll over them and I see, oh, okay, they had Swordsbane, and that makes sense. That never happened. They still would just rip through cavalry, rip through Pegasus riders, anything, like anything and everything. They just tore through them without any effort whatsoever. So I have no idea. So that just, again, there being no native weapon triangle. Battalions, I never even looked at them too much. I never looked into them too much, but god damn, they're overpowered. They generally would do a ton of damage. You cannot counterattack a battalion attack. After you get hit by a battalion, you're pretty... I don't know if this is always the case, but you're almost always locked in. Like, you can't move on your next turn. Most of the time you can still attack, but you can't move. And there are usually additional other negative effects to it. Like, good golly, battalions are broken. And I never even delved into them too deeply. So I can't even imagine what they're capable of if you're actually actively looking for the most overpowered battalions and using them optimally. You could probably bust through entire levels with nothing but battalion attacks. Thank God they're limited. Could you imagine if they weren't? What else do I got? I kind of already mentioned my next point. Units appearing unbalanced. I'm thinking that they're not, though, because this was an impression that I had just because of my first playthrough. So I had... my first playthrough was the church route, and so I had the main character, Petra, I had recruited Felix, and Catherine was on my side. And like I said, all four of them were my four most dangerous units, and it wasn't even close with anybody else that I had on my team. Like, Petra was untouchable. Just to give you an example, in the very last map, which should be full of the strongest possible units in the entire game, nobody that I can recall had higher than a 15% chance to hit her. She was untouchable. Now, Petra is somewhat balanced by the fact that it is possible to just get absolutely atrocious strength growths on her, which I'd say I probably got fairly average. Like, she wasn't really able to just two-shot everything that came in her path, but it doesn't really matter if you can't ever hit her. Like, every single unit in the map can just surround her and take turns and never actually hit her. And then she just slowly whittles them down. Eventually, they're all going to die. But in the middle of that, actually I shouldn't say in the middle, to the very far other extreme of that were Catherine and Felix, where they were nowhere near as unhittable, but they had far better strength growths. And so they guaranteed killed anything that came their way, because they were fast enough to double hit everything, and they were strong enough that they did enough damage to kill everything after those double hits. In Catherine's case, she even had her special weapon, which is goddamn strong. And then in the middle of those two was my main character, who did not dodge quite as much as Petra, but still damn near untouchable. Like, Petra, like I said, probably less than 15% chance to hit for the entire map. The main character, I never noted anything higher than 30%. So still, I mean, you have a better chance to hit him, but chances are you're not going to hit him. And he hit a hell of a lot harder. That's not even getting into his own special weapon like Catherine's, which just, dear God, he almost could have soloed the final map of the church route. The only thing that he would not have been able to solo would be the final boss, since the final boss does full heal before every single turn. It's impossible to solo that. But aside from the final boss, he could have killed everything on that map by himself without struggle. It's insane. And again, that's hard mode. That shouldn't happen. But then I also had in the second playthrough, I finally had units that would use armor. They just can't get hurt. Like, unless they're up against a magic user, everything did 0 damage to them. It's crazy. Absolutely. So I don't think it's just that... Originally, that was my impression, that it was just sword users that were massively unbalanced. But after playing, like, I don't think it's sword users at all. I think the game's just unbalanced. And then you also are getting into kind of an imbalance between weapon users and magic users. Like, why does weapon durability... Why would you get rid of magic durability, more or less, but keep weapon durability? I don't really understand that decision behind that mechanic. And... now again, magic does kind of sort of have durability in that you have a limited amount of spells per map. But those uses are refreshed between every single map. And as you progress, as you get higher in the rank of whatever, either faith or reason that's guiding those spells to begin with, you get more uses, to the point where, like, I never ran out of... The only spells that I would run out of would be the blatantly overpowered ones. So, like, Dorothea would get Meteor, and she only got, I think, was it 3 at the end or 2? I think it was only 2 uses. So obviously you're going to run out of that pretty quickly. Or like a healer with Fortify would only be able to use Fortify 4 times. So, like, those kinds of things. But you want to just get into your normal spell, which, again, was generally one-shotting whatever you would run into. You never run out of that. You would get, like, 20 casts per map. It's insane. So I don't really understand that as well. Alright, so what else is... Oh, you can infinitely grind if and only if you pick normal mode. When you go and you pick to battle, like for your weekly action, you had, what was it, Explore, Seminar, Rest, or Battle. If you picked Battle, you had a certain amount, you kind of had a separate stamina bar for that. I don't know if you can ever get more than 2. 2 actions was the maximum that I personally got, but I never maxed out my Professor level. So I don't know if that gets higher eventually. Did I ever get 3? I feel like I only ever had 2, but I can't actually, I'm not 100% sure at this point. But either way, so in hard mode, every single map that you can potentially go to requires you to spend a point. Whereas on normal, there were maps that were there that never cost you a point. I never tried it, but I assume it was infinite, because I went through, I think, 3 battles at the most, just to try to see, like, is there a limit to how many times I can do this? And then I got bored after the 3rd one, so I don't know if it is actually infinite or if it would end, like, maybe after 5 or maybe after 10, it'll eventually just be like, okay, you spent enough time here. I'm sure it's also, because I don't think it scales with your current level, it scales with what the date is, like what level all the enemies are. So I'm sure eventually, due to diminishing returns of experience gain, it would get completely pointless eventually to continue doing those maps, but like, that infinite grind is possible, you could do it. So there is that as well, affecting the potential difficulty. Let's see. The rest of it is all just kind of like, again, anything that would make it easier would be kind of pre-planning stuff. So like, actually knowing what classes do what. So planning, just planning out beforehand what classes you want to take all your units through. I never used any of the stat up items. I keep forgetting to use them because I never need them. But imagine, again, as I mentioned before, Petra, who got kind of sort of average strength gains. I don't know how many strength items I accumulated over the course of the playthrough, but imagine if I had just thrown all those on Petra and she got like an additional 10, 20 strength, however many of those items I had gotten throughout the game. And all of a sudden, she's just murdering things even more efficiently. Dear God. And you're raising her dodge rates up as well, because she never maxed out any of her stats. I've never maxed out anybody's stats. Not yet. And so, due to that, imagine like a maxed out strength Petra and a maxed out dexterity and maxed out speed, where it's just everything has a 0% chance to hit her. She's double tapping everything. And on top of that, she's maxed out strength. Like, dear God. And I never did that, but it was likely possible. So yeah, just, game's way too easy. That's my biggest criticism of it. The other criticism to do with the gameplay is like the class system seems a fairly bare bones in terms of what you're actually capable of. Like, they expanded it so much with Fates. Now, to be fair, a large part of that is because you had somewhat similar but slightly different versions of each class for the 2 factions that existed in the game. But still, you still had more options for each individual faction than everything that you have available in this game, period. Which feels a little weird. And so it's like, I'm kind of, when I was going through my 2nd time and now my 3rd time I'm going through the Blue Lions, I'm just looking at units and trying to be like, okay, what can I do that's kind of like different, that would be interesting? And it's like, nothing, really. There really aren't that many options. It's like, alright, I want to be a sword user. You have one path and one path only that will allow you to be a sword user. Great. I want to be a lance user. You have 2 paths to be a lance user. You can either be a regular paladin, or you can be a great knight. And that's it. You want to be an axe user? You can be a warrior, or you can be a great knight. Or I guess a wyvern as well. And Pegasus if you're female for lance users. You want to be a mage? You have one path and one path only. Unless you're, oh god, what's his name? The character that I hate. Starts with an E. Does it start with an E? No, it does not. What the hell is that emo-ass dude's name that's always trying to act like a badass, always threatening you and everybody else around you? Meanwhile, you just one-tap him without any struggle whatsoever, but he's still trying to act like a badass the entire time. Cannot remember his name, but I hate him so much. But he can be a dark mage, and as far as I'm aware, he's the only one that has that class available to him. Other than that, one path. You want to be a healer? Oh, wait, I take that back. You could be the Dark Knight as well. The Dark Knight, like you can become Batman. No, you have Dark Knight or you have, like, Warlock. Is that what it was? Sage? No, I think Sage is the mixture. Whatever. Faith. You have two paths. You can basically be the opposite of the Dark Knight, or you can be a Sage. This is like, or a Bishop. Whatever. Who cares? Point being, you don't really have choices. You don't really have anything different or unique that you can do. Now, to be entirely fair to the entire game as well, you can go and do whatever you want with whatever weapons you want. They don't have, like in old games, where if you picked a class, you were locked into only using the specific weapon types. You could go into a class that is built to use, or that is mainly built to use, like, lances and axes, and still use a sword, or still only use the knuckle weapons, you know, whatever. You can still do that. It is still possible. The game does not lock you into it. But still, like, generally you want to go the classes that will amplify your ability with certain weapons. And then on top of that, like, you can't really dance around between classes to try and, you know, like, alright, let me go into this real quick to get all the abilities that I want to use for lances, and then end in this that is not specifically to do with lances, but I think it looks cool and I just want to use this class instead. I think I had maybe 2 or 3 units by the end of the game in both of my playthroughs that had actually gone to the highest level of class. And the rest of them just, they'd never gotten there. They never met the criteria. They hadn't gotten enough proficiency. I think a large part of that was because picking battle was my least chosen option, which is my own fault. And so maybe if I had done that more often, they would have been able to get to those final classes. But it was just completely unnecessary. So, I don't know. Anyway. Goddamn, I went off on that for 30 minutes? Dear Lord. I'll ramble on. Okay, well, let's move on to the story. So, let me actually write that down. 26:45 is when I'd start talking about the story. So, spoilers will be incoming. Spoilers specifically to the Black Eagle / Church path. Nothing to do with the Blue Lions or the Golden Deer, because I have not played through either one of those. I have just barely started Blue Lions. I haven't gotten to a point where you actually learn anything unique about any of the characters involved, about the story, where you see a different perspective of the story. And from what I have heard, so maybe these complaints wind up being addressed if I had picked something else first, which I wish I had. I didn't know going in that everybody and their mother was going to pick Black Eagle first. I would have picked Blue Lions first. Like, after beating the game, and after gaining the knowledge that I got through beating the game, I would have picked Blue Lions first, if I could restart all over again. And apparently from what I have read, from a very, very small amount of research, people consider Golden Deer to have kind of the most complete story overall, where it kind of actually addresses everything. But so the first one that I beat was the Church Path, and this is where the main crux of my dislike of the game's story came from. So, as you're going through the story, you know, like, you're getting closer to all the units, you're kind of learning more about them. There comes a point where Adelberg asks you to come back to the Empire with her. She's leaving to go back to the Empire to handle some business. She wants you to go with her. You have to have reached a certain level of support with her by that point first, for her to request that. And that was actually where my first complaint came from, is that they give you no warning whatsoever that something big is about to happen. You just enter into dialogue with her like you normally would through exploring, and then all of a sudden, like, the edges of the screen go red. You start hearing like a heartbeat type sound, just dun dun dun, and then up top in like bright golden letters, "This decision will heavily impact the story from here on." And it's like, wait, what the hell did I get myself into? Hang on, can I just like back away from this for a second? Can I think about it? No, like, you're locked into that decision. So I actually wound up having to reload the save so I could finish my exploration first and then go make that decision. But so you make that decision, and then stuff happens. I don't know why I'm trying to avoid spoilers right now, because I'm definitely going to talk about spoilers pretty much right now. But if you do decide to go with her, that opens up a choice later on where you can side with her. So basically, the Black Eagle's path is the only one where there are actually 2 paths within it that you can select, that you can choose to do, depending on your whether or not you make that choice with Adelberg in the first place. So, crap, what was I again? Adelgard. I knew I was saying her name wrong. Adelberg. Where'd that come from? That's why I paused a little bit. Like, I'm saying that her name is not Adelberg. Adelgard, sorry. So you make that choice, and then later on it's revealed when you go, like you sit on the throne, some revelation's supposed to happen from the goddess and it doesn't happen, whatever. And then Edelgard's like, hey, by the way, I'm the Flame Emperor and I'm taking all your stuff. This is all mine. And so, betrayal, rah, purge them with fire. Rhea goes crazy, starts to kind of make you be like, all right, I didn't know you had this side of you and it's concerning, but sure, we'll handle this issue first. We'll talk about this reaction later. This is a little weird. It's kind of scary. So you handle all that, and then Edelgard is like, by the way, would you like to join me? You're like, well, hang on a second. Like, your faction, the side that you were on, is responsible for basically every single bad thing that has happened to me. So me being the main character. That has happened to me thus far in the game. You and your allies are directly responsible for killing my father not once, but twice. Like, can you imagine the mental anguish that would happen there? Where, like, you have to see your father die. And you're just like, holy, oh wait, I can turn back time. Oh, thank God I can save him. This is all fine. Dear God, I can't let this happen. This will hurt me too much. And so you turn back time. And now, knowing what's going to happen, you try to stop it. And for some reason, you get cock-blocked. That's never explained, by the way. They never explain how this dude has that power to just be like, oh, hey, he turned back time and he's about to murder whatever her name is. Whoever Monica was. I can't remember her name. Like, they're so unimportant that I can't remember any of their names. Whoever Tomas turns into, whoever Monica turns into, and whatever the hell the third dude's name is. They're so irrelevant despite clearly being the quote-unquote main villains of the story. They're so irrelevant in the Black Eagle and the Church Path both that I have no idea what their names even are. What's the point of them? That's a big issue, which I actually meant to get into later, but may as well get into it now. Why do they even exist if you're going to use them so little? It just sucks. That's actually one of my biggest issues, which I will get into later, but it's just... So anyway, you had to witness this entire village of people. The first village that you're in, Remire? Something like that. Go crazy because of experiments by this faction. They had killed themselves, and you had to witness all that. Your father died to whoever Monica turns into. You get sent to this realm where the goddess has to basically give up her being to save you. And now you no longer have her presence alongside you, which I'm sure was probably a pretty comforting presence. But now she's gone. All of that, Edelgard is directly responsible for. And yet the game gives you the decision to join her? There's no justifiable reason to ever join her. Not a single one, from at least a story perspective. Obviously, there's always the perspective of the player themselves who is detached, who does not have potentially like the emotional response that the main character would have in this same scenario. But from a writing perspective, there is not a single reason why the main character would ever choose to actually protect Edelgard in that particular moment. And yet, the game could have established it. The game could have 100% had Edelgard the entire time just kind of sowing the seeds of doubt against the church in your mind. Because there's plenty there to play off of. Like, even without Edelgard pushing me, there was still always that inkling in the back of my head, like, alright, clearly Geralt left this faction for a reason. Clearly he has his own reservations about the church. He even tells you, like, just be careful, man. Don't get too comfortable. You don't know everything. And then, like, the reactions you see from Rhea in certain scenarios, how mad she gets, how emotional she gets. There's very clearly something going on with Flayn and, what's his name? Sedith. And Rhea, all of them. Like, there's very clearly a lot that you don't understand, and a lot of fairly seedy implications regarding how the church acts, regarding how they kind of pretty clearly want control of everything. Which is not good. You shouldn't want that. And so there's plenty there to kind of give you doubt of like, are we really the good guys? Doesn't really seem like it. Seems like we could be kind of not necessarily blatantly bad guys, but we're definitely not really the good guys either. And yet, despite that, Edelgard never pushes those buttons. She definitely could. She could sow those seeds of doubt where it's kind of like, wait a minute, maybe she's on to something. Maybe I don't want to be on these dudes' side. But basically everything she says up until the point of her betrayal is anti-empire stuff, anti-noble stuff, not necessarily anti-church things. And so, like, you come to find out, if you do go through the Black Eagle route, she has some very justifiable reasons for what she's doing. Terrible way to fix them, but justifiable nonetheless. But you never get even the slightest inkling of those if you go the church route, which is just a massive missed opportunity. Like I said, there's plenty of stuff to play off of there that they should have played off. Like, you're writing this story, you have time to go through. Like, when you're writing multiple paths, and yet, how do I phrase this? And yet it's so very clearly obvious that they have good reasoning for doing this, but they never ever even try to reveal that reasoning if you go down a different path. That's just bad writing. There's no other way around that. That's bad storytelling. And so that's the main issue that I have, is that, like, the things that are pushing the story forward are not there because they make sense, are not there because they flow particularly well. There are things that are hidden specifically so that the story even works, which they shouldn't be. That means you have a bad story on your hands and you need to go back and fix some things. But yeah, so anyway, enough about that one particular decision. So, let me go through. I actually have this all written down so I can actually, go through this and have it make sense properly. First things first. Many things are way too story. Like I mentioned the antagonists, where you have Edelgard, you have Tomas, you have Monica. And so, let's talk about Tomas first. Every single other staff member in the game, so people like, not even necessarily staff, but like people that are actually kind of employees of the church, who are not students, essentially. So you have characters like Catherine, Shamir, Tomas, what's the dude's name? Starts with an H. I'm blanking. Whatever. Manuela, Sedith, anyway, all of them. You can, not Tomas, all of the other ones that I listed except for Tomas, you can go to and you can receive training from these people. They have specific proficiencies that they can teach you in. Tomas is the only staff member in the entire game that you cannot get that from. Why? Why is he unique in this regard? It makes it pretty damn obvious. I take that back. Him and Jariza, those two both. So it lends suspicion to both of them of like, why can't I actually interact with these two the same way that I can interact with everybody else? That's a little weird. And then you come to Monica later on, where you have to rescue Flame and Monica. And the story specifically says, congratulations on recruiting Monica. From this point forward, or not recruiting, congratulations on saving Monica. From this point forward, she's going to be part of your class. And yet she never joins your class. You never get, again, you don't have any of the same things that you can do. You can't invite her to tea. You can't support her. You can't try to give her lost items or give her gifts. None of that is available. So once again, something's different about her. There's very clearly something seedy going on. And this just basically solidifies it that Monica is a bad guy. You're not supposed to know that, not yet. But the game makes it clearly obvious through its mechanics that she is not that she's going to wind up, turning on people and betraying you. So it's not like oh my god, I never saw that coming. I was like, yeah, nah, about tracks. Same thing, Geralt dying. You can't there's no supports with Geralt. So it foreshadows that 100%. Like, you had to already know going in, if you've ever played any other Fire Emblem game, of course Geralt's gonna die. The first thing, when I saw the very first trailer for Fire Emblem 3 Houses, I saw Geralt, and I was like, yep, that dude's dead. 100%. Like, you just had to know. Happened to Greil. Happened to basically every single parental figure that has ever existed in Fire Emblem. Their parental figure dies pretty early on. So you had to know Geralt's dead. But the game, again, made it incredibly obvious, besides just knowledge of the previous games, by not actually giving you any. You can't try to recruit him to your team. You can't have. He won't support you. You can't just try to do, like, even just giving him the ability to have mission assistance with you. That mechanic, which I've never actually used. Even just giving him the ability to do that with you would potentially kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe there's more to him in the story. Maybe he has more effect on everything around you. But then, he winds up not. But at least don't make it blatantly obvious. But they do with all of those characters. So that's a pretty massive misstep. let's see. Character interaction not really existing. Like, if you go and you play through, every single pre-mission dialogue is incredibly formulaic. The characters don't really interact with each other. They don't really talk to each other. It's basically like Edelgard or Seteth, whoever is kind of like the main. And this is even a case so far with the very little experience I have so far with Blue Lines with Dimitri instead of Edelgard or Seteth. They basically introduce the mission to you. There may be like a little bit of back and forth between them and the main hero, and then every single character that's part of that faction will then have like one line to add to it. But that's it. They don't actually like have anything of substance to say. They don't really interact with each other at all. It's just like, hey, this character exists. Let's remind you that they exist with this one line of completely useless dialogue, and there's no actual real interaction between yourself and these characters. It's just, again, it all boils down to basically just bad writing. Let's see. Okay, I already talked about those. Oh, choice. Whoo, this is the second thing that really, this is the thing that, like, that first option where, like, oh, you can protect Edelgard here and be on her side, or alternatively, you can be like, all right, no, screw her, screw everything she stands for, screw her allies, I'm killing everybody. That was the first choice where I was kind of like, why did they even give you this choice? Who would ever select to be on Edelgard's side after everything she and her allies have done? That's ridiculous. But the biggest one that really was just like, why is this even possible? You would just, now this is on the church route specifically, you would just gone through and you would take in this bridge that connects like the land that the church is on and the Empire. And so it's like a very important military focal point to allow, like units to move back and forth freely. And so you take this this bridge, and then one of Dimitri's allies, I can't remember his name, it's that like redheaded knight guy. He shows up, and he's like, hey, heard you took this. This is our plan right now. We're going to march on the Empire. We're going to have one big final battle. We have Dimitri with us. We have, oh dear Lord, I have forgotten Golden Deer Boy's name. I'm so terrible with names. I'm so awful. Whatever. We have Claudio. We have Klaus? Shit. Whatever. We have those two with us. We have their entire military might alongside us. We're going to fight Edelgard. Would you join us? And you have the choice of saying yes. Absolutely. I'm in. Let's go. Or you have the choice of saying, no, we're tired. We need to go back and regroup. Of course, me being me, I pick, hell yeah, let's go. Right now. And Seteth is instantly like, no. We're not going to do that. We need to go back and regroup. Why do you even give me the choice then? And not only that, directly afterwards there's a loading screen, and then you get a soldier coming back with news. Dimitri and, again, Klaus, their armies have been wiped. They've suffered extreme losses, but so has the Empire. Edelgard's been heavily wounded. They almost won. Almost, but not quite. Guess who would have been a tipping point in that fight if they had been present? You. The game gives you the decision, or at least they pretend to give you the decision to move on and go fight and have a heavy impact on this battle and potentially end it right there. But no, story's not done yet. We still got more to say. We still have more levels to give to you. We need to make this story longer. And thus we're going to prevent you from making the clearly superior tactical decision just for the purpose of storytelling. And so it's like, hey, all these people are dead. Guess whose fault it is? Your dumbass. But really it's not, because you made the correct decision. The game just cock-blocked you from it. Again, why even allow you to make the decision? It's just so frustrating to see that happen. And that's what really killed the game's story for me instantly, was just this knowledge that, like, storytellers don't care about you. They don't care about telling like an actual logical story with good ebb and flow to it. They just want things to happen that are supposed to be impactful emotionally. Where it's like, oh, Dimitri's dead? Oh no! Whereas for me it's like, you goddamn dumbasses. Guess who wouldn't have died if your characters had made, again, the clearly correct decision? But no, you don't get to do that. The storytellers blatantly prevents you from doing that. And so like it takes away completely from any potential emotional impact of that occurring. Imagine how much different it would have been if again, just like, I mean, so Geralt, less so, because you knew, again, before it all happened, you knew Geralt was dying somewhere, and so that takes away from any sort of emotional impact of his death to begin with. But imagine if you had the same kind of sort of thing going on with Dimitri, where you're going in all 3 of your armies to confront the Empire all at once. You're thinking, we're probably going to take some heavy damage here, but success is inevitable. And so you go in, but the opposing military might is overwhelming. They have too many units, they're too strong. You are all, like, you've been marching all this time, you're ill-equipped, you're all emotional. You've been through so many fights just to get to this point in the first place, whereas the enemy are all fresh. You have so many disadvantages, but still, you're going to end the fight here, no matter what it takes. And despite everything that you do, despite everything that you try, Dimitri still dies. Klaus, I'm settling on him being named Klaus at this point. Klaus still dies. He doesn't actually die, but still. Let's just pretend that happens. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Nothing. You just lose. Your armies just aren't strong enough, and you just lose. And you have to suffer that defeat and then go back and regroup. Imagine the difference in that versus just secondhand a scout coming back and be like, hey, Dimitri's dead, peace. It means nothing. It's meaningless. There's no impact to that whatsoever. Like, what the hell? It's just such an enormous missed opportunity. I hate it. So, what else do I got? Gilbert. I even wrote his name down here, and I didn't go far enough to read about that. Cloud. It's a mixture. I wrote his name down too. Claude, not Cloud. This is in Final Fantasy VII. I even wrote his name down too. I'm trying to think. Is it Claudio or is it Klaus? It's a mixture of the two. It's Cloud. Claude. Whatever. Oh, I'm terrible. I guess that's more or less kind of it. Because then it's basically like my last note. So the other 2 notes are things that I've already mentioned. So like this very first, I'll just read it specifically. The Flame Emperor's first attempt to recruit you was laughable. I didn't actually talk about that one. But like, it really is so weird. Like your very first interaction ever with the Flame Emperor is after Remare happens. And so you just witnessed like whatever has caused this madness. You know it's the Flame Emperor. You know it's their allies. And then the Flame Emperor shows up out of nowhere and is like, hey, kinda wish that hadn't happened. Didn't know they were gonna do that. They're still my boys, though. I need them. Can't give them up. But I would have tried to stop it if I knew. I just didn't know, because I'm ignorant and stupid. By the way, you want to join me? Like, what? No! What kind of bullshit is this? It's just, And then the second one is just, again, Edelgard not sowing doubt in mind about the church, only continually asks, will you stay with me regardless of what happens? But never really gives you reason for, like, why. So again, that's kind of also a spoiler too. Like, more or less, she's kind of spoiling that something big is, she's going to do something big, which is going to give you doubts about her. And she's trying to just be like, promise you'll stay with me forever? No. Promise me you won't kill my father and I'll consider it. Anywho. Yeah. And then just again, choice. The choices they give you in the game are no choices at all, so why even give them to you in the first place? Yeah. And then if you go and you pick the other route, again, they have very solid reasoning for everything they're doing. Terrible methods, which, you know, you could be there and you could give them guidance for what would be far smarter, how to handle these scenarios. But they never took any of them, or they never give you that opportunity to really kind of be like, okay, yeah, church is clearly in the wrong here. There's clearly something up. Let's fix that. Make sure they don't continue being able to do the same thing forever. But yeah, they never actually give you that opportunity. And then there was one more thing that I did not write down, but it's at the tip of my tongue, and I'm just missing it entirely. What did I want to talk? Oh no. Oh, this is horrible. Because it was something that was like, I thought was halfway important, but I cannot for the life of me. Let me just read through this real quick again. Hope something pops up. Nope. Damn it. What was it? It was right there. Alright, well, I can't think of it. I can't remember it. I'm just gonna have to move on. Plus, I've been going, like, this has to be more than an hour by now, right? Nope, 50 minutes. Almost. I can just sit here for another 10 minutes and see if I remember before that. I'm not going to. That's always... I'll remember it like 5 hours down the line. And by then, I'll be like, whatever, doesn't matter. It's not important. Shit, what was it? Think of it quickly. Before it's gone forever. Oh, I hate this. I'm just trying to, like, run through all the characters in my head, see if any of them kind of remind me of what I wanted to talk about. But nah, it's nothing's coming. Nothing's going to come. I tried. Oh! This actually is not what I wanted to talk about, but, like, what the hell is the Black Knight? And, like, he's clearly an important character. Clearly. Very blatantly an important character. And yet the most you get is speculation. Oh, I think that's Choriza, but you never actually know. And then even when you join the Black Eagle, like, it makes sense if you join the Church Path that you never find out who the Black Knight actually is, what their interest is in you. That's fine. I get that. They're an antagonist the entire time. They shouldn't reveal anything to you. You just brawl with each other and then it all ends, right? Doesn't have to be revealed. Doesn't need to be. So I'm perfectly okay with that. But then you join the Black Eagles instead. You join the Empire. Now the Black Knight is on your side. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. Those who slither in the dark, or whatever the terrible name. You never actually have any interaction with them. Like, you have one tiny little moment before the time skip where he actually joins you in the fight. And then afterwards, you never actually hear... The only time you ever heard about them was... Or at least that I recall hearing about him again. There's a conversation you can have with Manuela where she's like, I talked to him. I confronted him about stabbing me. Can you believe it? He was apologetic. I didn't expect that at all. Turned out to be a very nice guy. And, like, that's it. You never see him. You never have a mission with him. You never find out who he actually is. Nothing. Edelgard even mentions beforehand, like, when the Black Knight first shows up in that fight. She's like, I understand that, you know, you had fights in the past. You probably have some trepidation about being on the same side as him, but please, I'll explain everything afterwards. Just deal with it for now. And then she never actually explains anything. You never hear anything more about him. Like, what the hell? Just, Alright, so, those who slither in the dark. I do not know if more is revealed about them in either the Blue Lions or the Golden Deer routes. I sure as hell hope so. Because in the Black Eagle route, you basically more or less get nothing about them. Aside from, like, hey, I hate them, I hate their methods, I hate what their goals are, but we need them to fight the church. And then afterwards, like, after you beat the game, you don't get... Nothing is revealed about them. You don't know anything about them. You go in just as ignorant as you were beforehand. In the church route, you beat Edelgard, and then you find out that a note was left for you that says, like, hey, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Here's the location of the real people behind all this. You can't let them roam free. Please go deal with them. And then you just have one level where you just kill them all. Nothing's revealed about them. You still don't know what their goals are. You still don't know anything about them. Again, they're still so unimportant overall, despite supposedly being important. They should be more important than what the story actually gives you. You just get one level, and you kill them, and that's it. No more. That's just it. One level. That was another kind of complaint that I have about the game in general, is like, you have so much build-up beforehand. Where it's like, you know, it's introducing all the characters, it's introducing the world, you're kind of getting more and more detail about the interactions between all the factions, any potential antagonism that occurs between them. You're getting all this information. And then you get to the end and it just blows through everything as quickly as possible with basically no storytelling behind it at all. And so, like, if you do the church route, you are given 3 levels at the end where you beat the Empire, and you remove that threat, and then the very next level, you rip through those that slither in the dark, and you remove that threat, and then the final level, where you find out kind of more or less what the seediness of the church really is, and then you rip through that threat, and the story's done. But there's really no expansion whatsoever on any of the effects that all these things have on the world at large, nothing. It just ends. Like, everything happens so damn quickly, it's just weird. That was the one thing that I wanted to, mainly about, again, those that slither in the dark. So again, I don't know if this is something that is expanded upon further in either the Golden Deer or the Blue Lions playthroughs, But just the fact that, like, in the church route specifically, you still have to go and fight them. Or, like, in the Black Eagle route, they're your allies. And yet you barely get any real information about them. Very, very small amount of information where you find out, like, more or less who their leader is, what their connection is with Edelgard, and clearly that they are the ones pulling the strings behind everything. But that's the most you get. You don't get anything beyond that. And then in the church route, you don't get any information whatsoever. All you do is you just go kill them. And that's that. It's just so weird and such a huge missed opportunity. That's kind of all that it is like, the entire story behind this game is so haphazardly told and just full of so many missed opportunities where it's like, everything that's actually interesting about the story is not expanded upon in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah. Get better writers. Pretty please and thank you. Now I have damn near gone on for an hour, so I am going to dip. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far. If you haven't, I don't blame you, but you won't hear this anyway. I am out. Have a wonderful day.